Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to episode 90 of the Cloudcast. Today, we're coming to you live from the CloudStack Collaboration Conference here in Santa Clara, California. This is Aaron, and it's just me today. One bit of feedback we hear over and over from our listeners, they'd really like to hear more from actual customers and actual users, and what are some of the use cases going on in cloud computing today. So today we have Kirk Jantzer here to talk a bit about his environment and cloud computing and what he's seeing and how they develop their cloud computing system. So Kirk, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
Good. You work for a very large website.
Yes.
We won't say who, but trust me, everyone has heard of them. But you're based out of Atlanta, correct?
Yes.
So down of Atlanta, Georgia. And so tell me a little bit, first of all, about kind of how you got started in cloud computing, because that's a pretty common question we get a lot these days of, a lot of people kind of maybe grew up in operations or on the sysadmin side. And we were talking before we hit record here, and you've got a pretty interesting story of, doing operations in a colo.
Yeah. I've always... For the last 10 years, I've been in IT, and I've always been in operations and needed to deploy servers in a manual fashion. Somebody still always needs to go to the data center, but after becoming a team lead a couple of years ago, I've learned a lot more of the responsibility of having to manage all of it, and it's getting a lot harder to manage both aspects of acquiring the hardware and as well as delivering it to the customer, which are my internal tech teams. And I just need something a lot more dynamic, and the cloud is getting there to be able to provide me that layer of abstraction to my customers where I can still rack servers in the data center, but it doesn't limit what I give to my customers. I can provision, just like Amazon, I can provision an M1 and a small, X large, any sort of configuration. You can really just break it up. It all comes down to cores, memory, and IOPS.
Oh, nice. Now so what I'd like to do is really kind of explore the history, if you will, of how we kind of got here. So you worked for a large website, and I guess it's kind of safe to say you guys were kind of doing things the old way.
Yep.
For a long time, but what were some of the big needs or use cases, and what was kind of driving you to the hack day and the kind of turning point that we'll get to here in a second? But what was that? What was the big thing driving?
We're getting a lot more into the software as a service architecture, and for each team, they need to manage their own silo of everything, and so it's breaking away from the normal mold of this is our entire back-end data center, this is our entire front-end data center. Everybody they might have things out on Engine Yard, they might have things out on Heroku, they might have things on this, that, EC2. They could have calls to APIs throughout, and we need to be a lot more dynamic in that regard, that if they come for this particular set of compute infrastructure from us, that we need to be able to spin it up fast. They can't, in the lean cycle, I can't wait 3 weeks for hardware when their project cycle is 3 weeks. I need to be able to provision it instantly, give it to them so they can start their project and move forward and either fail fast or succeed and move forward from there.
Sure. And so fail fast is something really interesting to me, because that's something we've actually been talking more and more on the show about. And Gene Kim was the keynote speaker yesterday at the CloudStack conference, and we've had Gene on the podcast before and had a bunch of conversations with Gene, and that's certainly one of his big philosophies in kind of the DevOps mentality and all of the ways and amplifying all the loops, and I think fail fast is probably a key, and also that that feedback loop, right, of you weren't necessarily providing everything back fast enough, so you needed to go faster,
right,
or they were going somewhere else.
Because I can't give a team a block of hardware, of 8 cores, 12 gigs of RAM, and SSDs, and then or spindles, and then they're like, oh, it's not fast enough. We need SSDs, or that's not enough RAM.
Right.
Like, the model behind that for even, like I can go upgrade the server, but then is it supported on the warranty?
Sure.
If I didn't buy it from the hardware vendor or from the if I bought third party or whatever, just to get it in rapidly.
Yep.
There's only so much I can do in that regard. Whereas if I have a service offering in a cloud infrastructure, and I can just say, "Oh, you need 4 cores? Boom, done.
Right.
Turn off the VMs, move it over to a service offering, done.
Right.
Everything's the hardware's upgraded.
Yep.
And then I just, if I need more padded infrastructure, just order a couple more servers.
Sure.
It's just,
And something I really found kind of fascinating, because I'm always, there's always these, well, okay, in Silicon Valley, things are done a certain way, and you have a certain architecture, and you're using all of these, Hadoop and Cassandra and, a lot of these other things. And it was actually kind of cool that you mentioned, well, my quote-unquote users, they're demanding things like that. And you're not in Silicon Valley.
right. Exactly. We're on the East Coast.
So it's nice to see some of those kind of more Silicon Valley niche technologies at times really start to make it out to mainstream. Now, still, again, being a web shop,
Atlanta is becoming the next Hollywood.
There you go. Exactly. Right. But so was it really customer demands, and again, air quote, customer demands, that really made you go and propose the cloud to the organization?
Because, like I said, I just can't deliver fast enough in a hardware model. I can't order servers fast enough, and I can only have so much on hand to be able to deliver those. So I can say, okay, I've got these particular set of servers. Will that fit your need? No, it won't. Okay, then you're going to have to wait this period of time. So you're going to have to reorganize your project timeline to fit that model. And if that gets delayed, you're going to have to delayed even more. So
what are some of the so the way I look at it is, cloud is very much a products meets a change in culture and a change in operational habits.
Right.
It's very much, everyone keeps talking about, a lot of times the technology is probably the easy part.
Right.
So,
and the virtualization has been there for years. It's just giving that abstraction layer to all of it.
So tell me, what kind of challenges did you see from a cultural standpoint, operation standpoint, internal politics, all the usual kind of barriers that aren't technology?
So for us, we're heavily PCI focused. We do a lot of auditing. We have egress firewall rules. There's a lot of security around it because we take credit card transactions. We don't store anything, but we have to, because we process transactions, we have to be PCI compliant. We have to say that everything that we manage under our web property is PCI compliant. That doesn't negate that developer A or B or C or the 200th developer that came on last week knows all those security policies, and when Will goes to start coding something in Engine Yard, doesn't know that the security policy is not to do this. And so there's a lot of, the more we can keep in-house, the more we don't have to worry about that. And that's always going to be a question. Similar to EC2, I do know that they are compliant with a lot of them, but as far as particular data models, if you don't encrypt this, how do we know? It's not under our control. How do we know that data is not being looked at?
Sure. So you have a really interesting story about how your organization got started with cloud computing, and it all started around an internal hack day.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about this hack day, because this is pretty cool. I wish a lot more companies would do something like this.
So like you said, the whole Silicon Valley is coming. We're trying to be on that model. We've been a lean development shop for a long time. We've practiced that. We deploy code twice a day. Okay. The development environment is when you push up your code, it gets tested as long as there's tests around it, or if you write your tests properly. It gets tested every hour, and then if it's good, it gets snapshotted and it goes straight into the production cycle on the next one.
Oh wow, nice.
So anybody who needs a new product feature, this icon over here or whatever, can either be done that day or the next day, as long as everything's flowing correctly. The company, in doing that, in being that whole lean, they've seen that other companies like Facebook and Google are doing some similar things where they provide a sounding board for people that aren't team leads or C-levels or VPs or anything like that to come and speak and say, this is my idea and this is why I think it would be groundbreaking for us to do this, or this is why it would change this. We need to do this or focus on this. And I presented last year and I didn't win for doing the same idea, but I'm also thankful I didn't win because when like I said, in those 2 years I haven't had time to really focus on the cloud. And now that I've had this time this year to really focus on it and where the cloud is at, what levels each of the both OpenStack, CloudStack, all the vendors that are, who's doing what other companies like Rackspace are putting wrappers around things, Dell with Crowbar and a couple others, Piston Cloud. Everybody's trying to get into this market, and I didn't know who was where. But now when I look back, I'm glad I didn't win last year because I don't think the cloud was ready for us.
Sure.
If I had won, we might have failed fast.
Yes. And
it would have been a good learning experience. But now we know that since I won, I've actually had time to solely focus on making sure the cloud works for us.
The Hack Day was like an internal competition.
Yes.
And what was the prize for winning?
A lot of money. A lot of money. At present, it's $10,000.
Right. And you get time to work on your project.
Yes, you're taken out of your current role for 6 weeks, and you get that is your sole focus. So if you're an engineer, or if you're a team lead or a manager, you're taken out of your role to focus solely on that for those 6 weeks.
Okay. And who judges this competition?
C-levels,
Gotcha.
VPs, a lot of the influencers in the company.
Right. So it's an internal hack day. Mm-hmm. And if you win,
and it's really
chosen by the leadership of the company, you get effectively 6 weeks to go see if you can make the company better.
Correct.
Very nice.
Yes.
And so what was your proposal when you won? It wasn't necessarily around a product.
Right.
Correct?
It was that we needed a dynamic infrastructure to deploy to be able to better I forget the exact terminology, but it was something around we needed to be more agile in the delivery of assets to our customers.
Okay.
Which is the customers are the internal tech teams.
Sure.
When they need these assets of compute, storage, cores, memory, IOPS, I can't rely on a physical box anymore. I need to be able to just deliver them and deliver them fast.
Right.
And if they don't need them, they can kill them and we can move on. It's not a siloed infrastructure that's out there collecting dust now.
Now, would you credit the fact that you were a lean shop already in helping that along? Because you kind of almost, you almost had that dev in DevOps already in place, and you were almost snapping ops into complete DevOps.
Well, that's the thing. I had to, because we've been lean for a while, and we're getting into this whole DevOps thing, and we're getting into the siloed software as a service architecture. I couldn't keep up with the physical assets anymore. I had to do something, and if we didn't, we would just continue to sound like I would continue to be the barrier of being able to deliver things. And
so it was your way of getting the hell out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. And I had to. And I'm still going to have I'm not scripting myself out of a job.
Right, and that's a great point because that's
somebody's
actually
still going to rack the server.
Yeah.
Somebody's still going to manage the infrastructure. Somebody's still going to manage the cloud layer. Somebody's still going to manage all of that stuff and everything around it. There's still umpteen things to learn about the cloud and how it operates and how it is.
And that's a great point because I come from an operations background, and I feel like a lot of people in operations are anti-DevOps because they almost feel like it empowers the developers too much, and it's a us versus them power struggle kind of thing.
Right.
And I don't necessarily see it that way. I just see it as being more efficient and going faster, and that just makes sense.
Right. and you get to focus on the things that you really want to focus on.
Exactly.
And that are, like, the way I look at it is, it's that person that's holding the cookie pot.
Yes.
It's like, this is mine, these are my toys, you can't play with them or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you need to be able to manage what you have a lot better. if you can get really good at deploying servers fast, both from the cloud layer and from the instance layer, I mean, there's no question that you're going to continue to get patted on the back about how you're delivering your assets to your customers.
Sure. And so for you, it was a win-win-win in the fact that, you put a little money in your pocket,
yep.
but you were able to make your job easier,
yep.
and you were able to make your business go faster.
Correct.
So tell me a little bit about, because we had talked about before we record, it's unless you win something like this, like getting into cloud computing, if you're in operations, is almost difficult at times because you got a day job to do.
Correct. Like
right? How do you have time to necessarily keep up with everything and what's going on? And like, would this have been possible?
No.
Without the hack day?
No, it would not have, because I've tried. I've been to the OpenStack Summit. I have a book regarding OpenStack and how to deploy it, and I've read blogs, and followed a bunch of people on Twitter, and I've just been following the community as a whole on how it is, but actually getting time to physically install it. And going back to the hack day, the 6 weeks is long over. It's been over for 6 weeks,
sure.
8 weeks now.
Yep.
I'm into the stage of I need to deploy it at this time, but I know about it, and I know that's not my hiccup anymore. It's actually getting the infrastructure in place to physically deploy it.
Sure.
That's I don't want to say it's a holdup. I'm just having to really feel out. Now that I know what the limitations are, what the caveats are, what the benefits are of doing this, and what our needs are, I can really focus on and hone in on what I need from a vendor delivery.
Sure.
Saying, okay.
And this being, the CloudStack conference, I'm
Yeah.
going to assume you pick CloudStack.
Yeah.
But so tell me a little bit about, I don't want to make it a CloudStack versus the competition question, but I do want to understand, like, what were some of the criteria you used to evaluate, is this a good product or not? And what are some of the use cases you necessarily compared against?
Well, that's a great point, because a lot of the hardware and software that we have in our environment is a lot of off-the-shelf stuff, but we use it to the nth degree.
Okay.
A lot of vendors will come in and be like, okay, we can do 1 million IOPS, but we can't do 1 million of those IOPS. It's like,
sure.
We find bugs in a lot of our vendors' products because we just push them. We do things completely differently, even though we just we use a load balancer, but we use it this way, and we do this, and it's crazy the way we do things, even with off-the-shelf products. I mean, we have unlimited support cases open with vendors about different things. It's just, and it's not about pinning CloudStack versus OpenStack versus VMware. Like, whatever works for you works for you. What I looked for a cloud solution, I needed something that was easy to deploy, easy to manage, just easy everything. And I liked CloudStack better. OpenStack is a great product. There's a lot of people in it. It's great, but it wasn't great for us. I liked CloudStack. I liked everything about it.
Yeah, and I'm probably guilty of it as well too. A lot of the quote unquote people in the industry who we run around to all the shows and we talk to all the people and we go to all the sessions. Sometimes we just get too caught up in checkboxes and technical features when at the end of the day, it's honestly what is the lowest barrier to entry,
right?
And what is the sometimes it's a Walmart world of it's good enough.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And I find it very interesting that was probably, would you say that was one of your highest criteria of you kind of had the clock was ticking.
Right.
And when the clock was up, this project, I wouldn't say had to be done, but you certainly had to show some level of...
I had to have, by the end of the 6 weeks, I had to have production instances on the cloud.
Okay.
So I did have a hard deadline of it worked for us. There was something in place. I couldn't just be like, oh, I need time to look at a cloud solution. Right. I needed to have production instances. So I really had...
Right.
And I've talked to people in the community that are like, they're still testing OpenStack and CloudStack, but it's like year to 2 year venture of... Right. And they've gone through, on OpenStack, they've gone through whatever the E version was, and then Folsom. Essex, and then Folsom,
yep.
and then whatever G is now.
Grizzly,
yeah.
Yep.
and they've gone through multiple versions and they know it from front to back. I didn't have that time. I had 2 weeks really that I broke up my 6-week time frame into, okay, I have a couple weeks to do this, I have a couple weeks to do this, and I have a couple weeks to do this, and I've got a couple days padded on each side. If any of them ran over, I could, and I knew about OpenStack because I'd been to the OpenStack Summit, and so I knew there was, I'd talked to a bunch of people. I'd talked to a couple of the architects, the cloud architects within eBay, and a couple within Wiki. Okay. So I've met some people, and so I knew about things, but I just didn't really get time to what works for us. What
from an operations standpoint.
Yeah. Because I needed to be able to manage it, both getting the hardware in there, what was good for it, and then being able to divvy it back out to the customers, or even at some point letting them do self-service.
Gotcha. Now, what would you say is like the next big thing? Like, okay, now that you didn't necessarily fail fast, it seems like it is at least, the hack day and the project and the idea seems very successful so far.
Yeah.
So what's next, and what's the next round of things the developers are asking for, the business is asking for? Where do you think you're going to go from here?
That isn't really, I haven't crossed that bridge yet because I still need to get the cloud out there. Mm-hmm. One thing I am finding is that the vendors aren't cloud ready yet.
So tell me a little bit about that.
So that's what I'm finding is that in that automation, vendors are still, a lot of them don't have APIs, or if they do, they're very immature. They have very minimal features of just a couple set of things and get things. They have it, but it's not full featured yet. And whereas CloudStack is the complete opposite. Everything is done in the API.
Right.
The UI is more of just like a show tool. And there's a lot of features that are released into the API that aren't released into the UI yet. They might make it into the next version, but everything is based around the API. And if you want automation, you need to have something where you can run commands and script things out.
Yes.
When I have 3 people on my team, we can't be doing a lot of pointing and clicking. If I need to deploy 100 instances, I can't go click 100 times.
Select all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's crazy. And people, the developer who wrote Cloud Monkey, there's the API which you can totally interact with, but then when you get Cloud Monkey and just completely script your whole thing of building whole new zones or even deploying hundreds of VMs at a time.
Yep.
There needs to be automation, and there's a lot of hardware vendors that aren't there yet. There's a couple that are really breaking the barrier, but there needs to be a lot more acceptance of the cloud and a lot more automation capabilities.
Yeah, and I would say too, just based off of past shows we've had, we get amazing traction on anything DevOps related or anything API related.
Yep.
And there just seems to be a lot of interest in APIs, and APIs really being that key to going faster.
Yeah. And
it is almost to the point where I don't even remember. Somebody said it on Twitter one time, and they were at one of the big hardware shows, and it was, if your hardware or if your products don't have an API, you failed.
Yeah.
That you're not serious about cloud in general, and not just that, but even the nuances of the APIs of keeping the API stable.
Yeah.
And how easy they are to interact with, and so that's actually
you can have an API, but if it doesn't work, it's useless. It might as well not have one.
I agree.
It's not just a particular facet. Like the whole industry needs to do it. To have software-defined storage, software-defined networking, software-defined compute.
Yes.
There needs to be a lot more automation around things from the vendors, but they also need to be sort of abstract. There needs to be a common thing where I know that if you're going to offer this feature, it needs to sort of be that I can do that same feature across another storage vendor. I don't need to rewrite my whole API around another vendor. I want to be able to say, okay, I need more. I want to do QoS on this, or I want to do VLAN tagging, or I want to do IOP limiting, or whatever. I can do it via the same API language and expect the same returns and stuff like that.
Yes, and that's probably one of the biggest limitations I've seen right now is everything has an API, but nothing's standard.
Right.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Well, cool. So we're about out of time for this week. So, Kirk, I know you're on Twitter based off of the roller coaster rides last night.
Yes.
So the joke is, so we're out here at the Cloudcast conference. We're across the street from in Santa Clara from Great America's, the amusement park, and they actually had roller coaster rides. My back is out, so there was no way I was going to attempt roller coasters last night. But Kirk was. I think you sent pictures mid roller coaster or something.
We were on the little daisy swing and the bumper cars and a couple others. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was definitely. I want to say this is probably the funnest conference I've been to. I've been to not several, but I've been to a few, and this was probably one of the funner conferences of just everybody's cool.
Yep.
It's a very, very tight knit community. It's less than, I think 500 people registered and showed up.
Yes,
which is awesome for a collaboration conference. You don't want. I looked at other cloud conferences for this year because my company, we get to go to a conference if we really want to make our case for it. But when I saw that there was the Cloudcast collaboration conference, I was like, you can't get any better than this. Like, this is going to be my sole focus for the next 3 or 4 days. And I actually, from Shape Blue, attended their training on Saturday and Sunday, so I got to even hone in on a few things that I didn't already know and really hammer some things home.
Very nice, very nice. So, Kirk, if anybody has any questions, where can they follow you on Twitter?
On Twitter, it's at Kirk Jantzer.
Okay. All right. So, if you like the show, please tell a friend or leave us a review on iTunes. You can follow us on Twitter at thecloudcast.net or on the web at thecloudcast.net, where you can find links to everything Cloudcast. Thank you, Kirk.
Thank you.
And thanks for listening.